There's a few things to think about if you're planning to make a hug curtain. I was looking at some that I'd seen and they had too many parts that were rigid or hard, and so I wanted to make mine soft. I made this out of two drop cloths that were 9 feet by 12 feet and 2 mils thick, which was still soft enough, but it was also thick enough that it didn't feel like it was flimsy and was going to rip at any moment. I made a couple of mistakes. I think I made the arms, even though I was planning not to make them too close to each other, I made them still a little bit close. I would have put them a little further away. I made the holes in the drop cloth a little bit big, which resulted in too much puckering. And the arms are a little bit long. That wasn't really a bad thing, though. I liked the arms. This one worked really well, but I would have done maybe a couple things differently, but it still worked out great. You're gonna need some sort of tape. I think packing tape would have worked. I used some stronger tape. You could use duct tape if you want to. It will show where they meet, but that's okay. I was trying to make mine as clear as possible. So as you're watching the instructions that follow, I would just change two things about them. Make the holes a little bit smaller. I would say maybe 2/3 of the diameter to half the diameter, because you can always make the hole larger. And then when you're attaching the arms to the holes, it might be easier to have the drop cloth hanging up rather than trying to do it on the ground. It's the hardest part of the whole procedure, and it helps to have a friend. Since the drop cloth is 9 feet by 12 feet, I got two 6-feet pieces of PVC pipe for the top. You can use something else, string. You could even reinforce it with some other drop cloth and put some loops on it like a shower curtain, but I thought this would keep it pretty steady. I'm going to put some weights on the bottom, but because it's 9 feet tall, I'm going to have, and I'm hanging up about 8 feet high, I'm going to have some slack on the bottom so that if the armholes are a little bit low, which I'm going to build them a little bit low, a person can move it up a little bit higher to make it fit them better. The drop cloth is not attached right to the pipe. It slides over it like a shower curtain. I want to have a little bit of slack in the middle, again, so that if somebody needs it, they won't get uncomfortable. They can pull it. Right in the middle, I've got something coming out of the middle, a little T-joint, so that I can have some string supporting it right there. Don't have to do it exactly that way. These circles are about where I estimate the top armholes are going to go. Again, I'm going to build them a little bit low because you can always lift them up a little bit with the foot of slack that I've got at the bottom. I also want to make them a little bit farther apart than they need to be so that you can pull them closer together if it's more comfortable, but if your arms are wide apart, then there'll be room for them to fit. From the second piece of drop cloth, I'm going to cut out a square 40 inches by 40 inches. That's about 1 meter by 1 meter. On one edge, I've gone up 12 inches and made a mark. It's about 31 centimeters. On the other side, same thing. The opposite side, I'm going in 12 inches, about 30 centimeters. And then I'm going to cut a line between these two corners so that I end up having two trapezoids. I've made a couple of marks along the way. It's hard to see on this carpet, but I'm going to use that to break it into two pieces. Now each one of these trapezoids is one of the arms, so that one square that we had is going to give us two arms. I'm going to take the two ends that are not parallel to each other, and I'm going to fold them like this so that they overlap maybe an inch. Use a little bit of tape to hold them in place. Now I'm using Gorilla Glue clear tape, but I think you could use packing tape just as well. And it's a good idea if you don't have something to cut it with to use a different pair of scissors than you use for cutting the plastic, because it leaves a residue behind and makes it a little tougher to cut. So I'm going to now cover up the overlap for one side. Then I'm going to turn over the small end where your hand is going to be. I'm going to put a little bit of tape on that one as well. It was to take the sticky side up, lay it down like this, fold it over to get one side. Now, one side has been done. I'm going to turn it inside out. And do the same thing to the end so that there's no loose pieces. Makes it easier to clean. And then also to get the other side that wasn't caught here, the other piece of overlap, just as I did on the other side. Now that I've got both sides taped pretty well, I'm going to trim off some of the excess. And this is going to be the part that attaches to the curtain. So I'm thinking about attaching it, an inch or two in, so there's some overlap. At this point, mine is going to be about 12 inches right there. So I made a circle with diameter about 3/4 of that length. In this case, about 8 inches, 2/3, 3/4. And the idea is going to be that this will be about the size of a hole that will fit pretty well where they overlap. Now comes time for making holes to put the arms in. I marked one side of this curtain with darker tape so that I could tell which side was which, because in this case I wanted one person to be able to put their hands on top and the other on the bottom. If you want to, you can have each side have one on the top and one on the bottom. But either way, I'm going to make sure that the holes are a little bit lower than I think they need to be, because since I have extra on the bottom, like I said before, you'll be able to pull the curtain up a little bit, whereas if it's too high, it's just going to be uncomfortable. I've made some markings while I was outside. Now I'm going to make marking the actual hole that I'm going to cut. And I've got one here, one here, and as I think I mentioned before, I want to have them a little bit further apart from each other than I think I need, because it'll be easier to bring them closer together than it would be to stretch them out. And then below them, I'm going to have two more holes with enough room that I don't feel like it's going to tear. Now that I've got 4 holes, I'm going to make 2 of them going in one direction, these 2, and then the other 2 coming through on the other direction. Like I said, that can be changed. I'm going to have some overlap of this, and I'm going to cut a little bit as I get in here. I'll see how much I need to cut. I'm going to cut a little bit to have some flaps and tape it down securely. Okay. So on this case, I'm having arms go through here. Person's going to be standing here for the top ones. I'm going to pull this through. This may not be obvious, but when I have this done, I want the seams to be on the outside, so not on the hugging side, since the other person's going to be in here. That's not like super critical. I'm measuring here about 2 inches down into the sleeve, and I'm pulling this circle kind of flat and lining it up. I think I'm going to make some cuts, about 2-inch cuts, maybe 6 or so of these cuts, so that I end up having tabs, 2-inch tabs. And this is what I'm going to attach to the inside of the curtain. Okay, so I taped each tab down and I've turned this inside out. And now what I'm going to do is have an assistant help me with getting some tapes. And I'm going to tape this in as close to a circle as I can around the arm. In the end, we decided to use some stakes to hold it down because it's a little windy around here. We tried putting weights in the bottom, but that wasn't enough and potentially dangerous to be flung around. So there was some puckering going on. Maybe should have made the holes a little bit smaller, but I think it's going to work out pretty okay. By the way, if you're going to be using this with multiple groups, like we use this with a party, and you want to clean it between huggings, what you can do is push everything through from the safe side that you're using to the other side. Get them all on, pointing out on one side, and spray it down with alcohol or wipe it. Let it dry. Doesn't take too long, and then pull through the ones that you need. Now that you're taking a close-up on the arms, a good time to mention two other things. One is that really it's pretty reversible, so in a way it doesn't matter which way you decide to be, the inside or the outside. You can, if you tape it up really good on all sides, it's reversible. And secondly, I mentioned earlier something about this, but it's hard to understand until you see it, and that is that I have the seams on the sleeves on the outside of the hug so that, you know, there's less plastic between you and the person that you're hugging. That's not super important, but I thought it was nice and it seemed to help a little bit when we used it.